Hey everybody, happy Cinco de Mayo. You are in the right place if you're here for Computer Science A. I'm Jill Westerlund from Hoover High School in Hoover, Alabama.
And I am Rob Schultz from Bellbrook High School in Bellbrook, Ohio, and welcome to day 2 of our final push towards exams. Today, we are going to be scoring the 2 questions that we shared with you yesterday to practice for the 2020 AP exam. We're going to take a look at the scoring guidelines and some other information. Whoops, I jumped one too soon. But again, like we said yesterday, I wanted to make note that these questions are questions that Mrs. Westerlund and I selected to kind of model what we know about the exam. We've modeled them to be similar in structure, format, but they were not necessarily intended to be representative of the exact content that's going to be on the exam. I mean, we know that question 1 will be arrays and array lists, and we know that 2 will be methods and control structures. And you know, we now have the sample questions that were shared by College Board that we can kind of model off of. So those are kind of the models that we're working off of when we put these practice, mock exam questions together. So so we're just going to jump right in. Did you have anything you wanted to add before we get into the thick of it here?
If you participated in the mock yesterday, I hope you open your code or get your sheets of paper out, to just kind of look through that and refresh your memory while Mr. Schultz goes through the canonical, and then we're going to discuss the open-endeds.
Yeah, we do have a pretty good bit. We are hoping we won't go quite as long today as we did yesterday. We have a good bit of information we want to share. So we're gonna not go through a lot of the things that you already saw yesterday. For example, we're not going to go through all of the steps of the questions like we've done in the past. We are going to jump straight to the scoring guidelines, and we're going to start to work through. So if you don't have your things in front of you, go ahead and grab them. If you're watching this as a recorded video, make sure you pause to get everything that you need to kind of go through and look at your response to the questions. And then we're going to jump in and go full steam. So okay, so on the screen in front of you, we have the scoring guidelines for the product review question, part A. The rubric and the canonical and all of that information is available on AP Central, and I believe it's in.
It's secure, so they probably
you might have to go
get
through your teacher to have your teacher
on AP Classroom.
It might be available on AP Classroom because I know that these questions were released out there. At least I believe they were. So, so walking through part A, the scoring guidelines for product review. It was a 6-point scoring guidelines, a 6-point rubric. We'll just kind of walk through them real quick, and then we're going to take a look at the released canonical that goes with the question, so we can kind of see how all of the points lay out. So first thing that a student would have to do is add a product review object to review list, and it says that the response can still earn the point even if you add a product review object other than the one referenced by the parameters. So if you add any product review object to review list, you would get that first point. You have to get the product name of the review to be added. You have to traverse product list with no bounds errors, and it says that you can use a for, an enhanced for, or a while loop. You have to compare the name in product list with the name from the review to be added. And it says you can still earn the point even if you use an incorrectly accessed value for either name. You can add new product name, or you have to add new product name to product list, and it says you can still earn the point if you add the new product name under the wrong conditions, or if you add an incorrectly accessed value for the new product name. And then number 6, you have to correctly have everything added. So correctly add the product name to product list if and only if the product name is not already in product list. So let's take a look at the canonical. Whoops, there we go. Take a look at the canonical. This is the canonical solution for this problem. And then we're going to step through those 6 rubric points and kind of point out where everything happens. Okay, so looking at the rubric, there we go, 6 points. Very first point, do we add product review, add a product review object to review list? And we do. The very first thing we do is we take the product review object that was passed in as the parameter, and we immediately add it to our review list. So that gets us the first point. Do we get the product name of the review to be added? We do. We take our product review that was given to us in the parameter, we call get name, and we store the name from that product review to a variable called product name, or prod name, I should say. Do we traverse product list with no bounds errors? We do. In this case, the canonical uses a for each loop. And if you remember back boy, it seems like years ago when we talked about the difference between for loops and for each loops. You know, there are some pros and cons to for loops and for each loops. One of the benefits of a for each loop is that there are no bounds errors. So it was a good choice for this one. Remember, one of the downsides of for each loops, though, the primary con, I guess, of for each loops is that you can't actually make updates to the array list if you're using a for each loop or the array. So you have to kind of balance that out. And in this case, inside the context of the loop, we're not making any changes to product list. We are only accessing those values. So a for each loop is a good choice. We don't have to worry about bounds errors that way. Do we compare name from product list with a name from the review to be added? We do. We're going through a for each loop. We're pulling each string value name from product list, and we're comparing each of those values to our product name, to the product name defined from our review. Do we add the new product name to product list? We do. We take our product name that we pulled from prod review and we add it to product list. And do we do it correctly? Do we correctly add product name to product list if and only if the product name's not already in product list? Well, in this case, we have a Boolean variable found that we set to false. As we go through our list of names, we check, we compare each name to the name that we're looking for. And in the event we find a match, we set found equal to true. By the time we jump out of the for loop, if we haven't triggered that and set found equal to true, if found is still false, then we go ahead and only then we add our name to product list. So those are the 6 points for the rubric. Now, I know we've been asked a bazillion times over the past several weeks when we talk about free response questions, does my solution have to exactly match this solution? And again, the answer is no. There are a lot of different ways that you could do this and still get those points. So as you look down through this rubric and you look at your solution, ask yourself, do I add a product review object to review list? And if so, put a check, give yourself a point. Do we get the product name of a review to be added? Do you call get name on prod review? And if you do, give yourself a check, you get that point. Do you traverse product list either with a while loop, a for loop, or a for each loop with no bounds errors? And if so, give yourself a point, and so on and so on and so on. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an exact match for the canonical solution that's here, as long as you are doing these things, okay? All right,
I've been looking back through my notes. For those of you who want to revisit the enhanced for loop lesson, which was fabulous, it was 6.3. So you can look back through the playlist on YouTube, and it was somewhere around, I think, the week of April the 6th through the 10th, but it was the lesson on topic 6.3. So that'd be worth your time to review before the exam.
Yeah, it's nice that College Board is leaving all of these videos out there. So if there are things as we work through these mock exams that you feel like you are not quite comfortable with, go back and look those specific topics up. The nice thing about watching these on YouTube, although I constantly tell my son and daughter not to do this, okay, so I'm not condoning this, but you can kind of speed up and slow down and look for the certain specific points if you are reviewing for the things that you want. So, I would always recommend watching it at regular speed. But if you want to, fast forward a little bit to find the point that you have a specific question about, that works okay too when you review. Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to do as far as going through the canonical and the rubric is I wanted to share, based on my experience as a teacher and based on my experience as a reader, just some common places where it might be possible to kind of trip things up a little bit and cost yourself a point. So I want to look at there we go. I want to look at some potential errors. Okay, and I should have called that something different, something like potential hotspots or something. So this is not meant to be an end-all be-all list of everything that Mr. Schultz says I could do wrong to lose points on this test. This is a list of things that if you have a good solid understanding of what the solution is supposed to look like, this is just a partial list of things where it might be common to do something wrong that'll cost you a point, okay? So I don't want anybody to misunderstand and think that Mr. Schultz is saying these are the only things we can lose points on. This is a list of some of the common mistakes. There are a lot of things that could be done incorrectly that might cost you a point here and there, but these are the ones that are probably the more common, or the ones that that I would expect to see the most often. So things like forgetting to declare and initialize local variables. It's very common both in my own classroom and as a reader. And if you're a reader that's watching this and you disagree, sorry, but this is my opinion, forgetting to declare and initialize local variables. You know, I've seen plenty of exams come through where the student starts by putting prod name equals prod review.getName, for example. You know, obviously not the same question, but they'll forget to declare a variable as a string, or they'll forget to declare a variable as a Boolean. They'll simply put found equals false. Well, we need to declare our variables. If you remember when we talked about free response questions at one point, we talked about the list of forgivable errors, you know, the no point penalties. And one of those no point penalties in past exams has been if you declare all of your local variables, but forget one. Okay, that's not going to be something you're going to have a penalty for. But if you never declare any local variables, typically that will cost you a point somewhere in the rubric. Okay, so make sure we declare all of our variables, make sure we initialize all of our variables so that everything works the way it's supposed to. Another common error, especially when we're talking about string comparisons, is it's very common to see students forget that we have to use dot equals and instead they use equal equal. So remember, it's been a couple weeks since we had string week.
I've already looked it up. See, I'm ahead.
Wow,
I'm like I'm on it today. April the 17th, it was a Friday. That is the lesson you need to go back and watch for the full lecture on equal, equal, and dot equals.
You are on top of things.
April 17th. It's
okay.
My two monitors makes all the difference.
That's like your X-Man mutant power is
That's
just
right.
being that super organized. Okay.
That's right.
So make sure we understand the difference between dot equals and equal equal. They do totally different things. And if you're using n equal equal product name, it is not going to give you the answer that you think it's going to give you. That would not count as a comparison. Okay. Yeah. You know, again, in this example, we use a for each loop, but a fairly common error that pops up is for loops that contain bound errors. So be careful when you're using loops, whether it be a while loop or a for loop, that you check your boundary conditions and that we don't have any bounds errors. That's another common area for mistakes. This is another big one on an array or array list question, making or accidentally confusing arrays and array lists. So remember, this is an array list. We have to use array list methods. I can't put square brackets and an index position. I have to specifically say I want to add something, or if it was a problem where I have to get something or set something, you know, confusing arrays and array list conditions, or I should say confusing the methods of accessing and updating arrays and array lists can be a point penalty somewhere in the rubric. Okay. And then another one that we've talked about is missing brackets. I've seen missing brackets cost students points before. And if you remember that list of non-penalized errors, one of them is missing brackets if indentation clearly conveys intent. Okay. So you know, in this case, if I accidentally left this bracket out by accident, I was just in a hurry and forgot to write the closing bracket. Well, this code is written in such a way that it's very, very clear what goes inside the for loop, what goes inside the if statement. It's very, very clear that this if statement is lined up with the for loop, so it does not go inside the for loop. So it wouldn't be a problem if I forget a bracket because everything is indented and very clear as to what goes with what. However, if this code had been written all left justified, and it's surprising the number of students that I've seen that do that because it can make code difficult to read. If all of this were left justified, then it would no longer be clear where this closing bracket was supposed to be and what was supposed to be included. So then that would cost a point somewhere in the rubric, most likely. Okay, so make sure as you're writing code, whether you're typing it or handwriting it, make sure to allow space so that even if you forget a bracket somewhere, everything is very, very clearly conveyed as to what goes with what. Okay, all right, that's it for part A. We're going to move on to part B, the scoring guidelines. Part B was worth 3 points. Okay, we're writing the get num good reviews method. We have to traverse review list with no bounds errors. We have to select all and only reviews with matching product names that contain the word best, and we have to return the correct count of good reviews. Okay, so there are only 3 points we have to look at for this one. And here is the canonical solution for this one. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to step through the points and we'll look at where those points are. And then we'll look at some potential little, you know, quicksand things that might trip you up a little bit. Okay, so for our rubric, 3 points. Do we traverse review list with no bounds errors? Again, for this solution, the author of this solution chose a for each loop, which is great because again, we're not updating review list anywhere inside the loop, which means that we can access everything very freely and not have to worry about bounds errors. So that's okay. Do we select all and only reviews with matching product names that contain best? So as I pick up a product review from your review list, the first thing we do is we check the name to see if the name equals our product name. If the product name matches, then we go inside and we get the actual review from product review. And if that review contains the word best, in other words, the index position of the word best is greater than or equal to 0, then we go ahead and we increment. So we are selecting all and only reviews with matching product names that contain the word best. All right, and finally, do we return the correct count of good reviews? We do, and this is where that error for declaring and initializing variables comes in. We have to create a counter. In this case, our counter is called num good reviews. We start it equal to 0. We go through, and when both of our conditions are met, then we increment num good reviews as we go through our loop, and at the very end, we return num good reviews. So we are returning the correct count of good reviews. Okay. And then looking at just potential errors. I mean, again, this is if you have a good solid understanding, you have a good idea of the logic that goes behind this, but then you just make a little thing somewhere that might cost you a point. These are examples of those little things that might cost things here and there. Okay, so again, forgetting to declare and initialize, and both are important. We have to declare num good reviews as an int. We also have to initialize it. And in this case, initializing it is probably the one that I would say would be most likely to be forgotten. It's very common to see students, pardon me, say int num good reviews, semicolon. They don't initialize the variable, but then they come down and they try and increment it. Well, again, the way plus plus works is it takes the value that's there and adds 1 to it. And if there is no value there, that can cause a problem. So we have to declare and initialize variables. Again, using string comparisons, using equal equal instead of dot equals. We've already talked about that one. For loops that contain bound errors. Again, that would be another common one. Incorrectly determining if substring is contained within a string. So this is another place that might trip you up a little bit. I know we looked at some different examples back when we were talking strings and traversing strings. We did one example where we were actually doing a substring to substring comparison, and we used a loop to traverse the entire string looking for an occurrence of the word. In this case, it would be the word best. You know, make sure that you understand the quickest and probably the most efficient way to determine if a substring is contained within a string. And if I use index of, remember the purpose of index of is that it's going to tell us the index position where this substring exists, and it'll return -1 if it does not exist. So it's a very quick, easy way for me to check and see if a word, for example, best, exists in review. That's a common place that you might see an error in a problem like this. And again, missing return statements. I was thinking missing brackets. So missing return statements. That's one we've talked about with past free response questions. You know, it's fairly common to see a method like this that has a return type that we have to return something, and the student is so focused on writing all of the correct logic and the correct code that they simply just forget to put a return statement at the bottom. And remember, that was one of our rubric points. So if you forget to put the return statement, then you wouldn't get that point for returning the correct value. And again, missing brackets. Missing brackets is one that I'm always harping my students about. So I'm going to harp you guys about it too. So, all right. So that's part B. And then that brings us to part C. Okay, and this is where we need to talk a little bit. You know, it's very easy for Mrs. Westerlin and I to come up with scoring guidelines and rubrics for the other parts of the question, because we don't have to come up with them. We just have to go out and find what was released with the question. But because we were the ones that wrote this open-ended question, any attempt that we make at coming up with a rubric for this, you know, we did our best to go out and try and make this look as close to what was modeled for us for this question. But at this point, trying to come up with a rubric and you know, guess how it would be scored would be nothing but just speculation on our part. So we did not do that. We didn't even try to come up with a rubric, because I'll be honest, to the teachers that are watching, your guess at how this is going to be scored is as good as ours.
And I wouldn't worry about it, because we've been assured there are going to be lots of places through all the parts of a question to get a 5 or get a 4 or get a 3. So you don't need to feel like if you don't answer this in whatever format is, you know, perfect or best, then you've sunk your whole self. You don't need to feel that way at all. there are multiple parts of exams for a reason. So so here's what we were thinking. You want me to go?
Yeah,
Ready?
go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So our thought was, when we were trying to come up with this, we had looked at part A and part B, and in part B, the method that you wrote that was just explained to you in part B was to identify which were the best, which products got a rating of best. So we felt like we could build off that, and maybe we would want a list of all the things that were best. So let's just talk about, if you were going to go buy something and you actually looked on a website, what got ratings of best. Well, I want to start with those 6 brands of my product to then start looking. So how would we put things in a list? We can build an array list of the things that were identified as best, and that perfectly fit with this problem. So our instructions were, and kind of notice, I don't know if you can hover your mouse under this describe. Describe the changes that would be made, and I'm going to talk to you in a little while about the verbs, but describe in College Board language means to tell the story. If you took CS principles, you probably have been well taught about identify and describe. But what we would want to know here is what's in your brain as the programmer. Tell us what you're thinking is sort of what this means. And if you haven't taken principles and you're a CSA student and you're more comfortable hammering out code, step outside that just a minute and articulate on paper what you're thinking. So describe the changes that could be made to get good reviews in order to create a new method. Now, do I have to use that one? No. You could start from scratch. But what Rob and I were thinking is we've already made this method that identifies the best, and it has almost everything we would need to build an array list of the best items. So how could we, leverage that? So you could describe it in another way, but that was just what was in our 2 brains. Anything to add to that before I hammer
Nope.
forward? Okay, so
Nope.
then at the bottom, make sure to include the following in your response. Bullet 1, and you don't have to answer these in bullets. You can write sentences for this. It really will probably just be one paragraph of 3 to 4 sentences is what I'm thinking that it would be. Write the method header for get best reviews by product, and that should be a different font, but that's just because we're not perfect.
Yeah, I goofed
That
it.
would be me.
No, that would be me.
Typing in Google Docs. But anyway, remember what I told y'all, we're persistent, we're not perfect. And that's what y'all need to strive for too. Be persistent. So write a method header. So what kind of method would you want to have? You already know the method name, so you've got a whole lot of it. So you got to add a couple things to that. Bullet number 2, identify. Identify is obviously a verb, meaning to state or list. So identify any new things, variables, data structures that you might need. And then 3rd bullet, describe. So we're back to describe. So that means kind of tell the story how the new or modified variables or data structures would be implemented. So essentially what we would say if I was saying it to you in pseudocode is we want to create an array list of only the things that are best. So if you go back to the code, maybe go up a slide. Yeah.
Mhm.
So if you look at this code, we are going to be making an array list instead of initializing a new variable on that line. So we're going to have a different name, and obviously, we're not going to be returning a number, so it'll be a different type, but we're going to be making an array list. We're still going to iterate through, and we're still going to be identifying if it's best, but instead of adding to an incrementer, we're going to be adding whatever the item is to our array list. So it really was just telling that story. You don't even need to worry about writing the code. So now go back down. So that's what we were thinking would be a way to envision another part to this project. So really, if your teacher teaches where maybe you discuss what else could be done to a project, and we did a lot of this during game week when we were doing all the card games, what could you
Yep.
do in Crazy Eights? What could you do in Go Fish? What could you do in War? A lot of that design thinking is sort of what we were doing when we were thinking about this method to add. And again, this was our attempt to emulate the sample that we have. And hopefully today we're going to talk a little bit about Gizmo toward the end. So
yeah, a friend recently described a problem like this by saying, she tells people that when you work on a problem like this, do it as if someone on the other end of the phone is trying to write the code and you are talking to them on the phone telling them what to do. Okay, I mean, you would basically type what you would tell them. But I like the analogy that you're using. I hadn't thought of it that way, that you're basically telling a story. You're writing the story of what you would do with all of this.
Yeah, so. And don't write the code. Notice that is in bold.
Yeah.
You don't want to write a code. You want to write a short paragraph. So, and don't stress. I think just kind of, like I say, tell what your thinking process is.
And it doesn't have to be volumes of information. We're not writing War and Peace.
That's right.
I agree with you. A paragraph, 2 to 4 sentences would probably do it. Well, let's say 3 to 4 sentences, but okay. All right. So let's move on to the Hailstone question. So with the Hailstone question, again, we kind of broke this apart, and I apologize. We realized after the fact that there were a couple of references from the original question that we used that said that you were going to be doing 3 different methods, and we, in trimming it down so that we were only doing 1 method, we forgot to go back and update that. So if that threw anyone, that is totally, I'm going to take the heat for that one. I'm
going to blame the inability to put a text box over an image. I'm hopeful that will update.
All right, we'll blame it on a tech issue.
That's
okay.
Right.
But part A for the Hailstone problem was 3 points. Looking at the scoring guidelines that were there, we have to it loops from a given starting value n until the sequence terminates using updated values for the current term. And by the way, I thought this was a really cool question. I actually sat down yesterday and started looking at different numbers to see what the sequence would look like. I don't know. I'm kind of geeky and weird like that. Second point, do we compute the next value? We had several formulas. If it was an even number, we were going to take the number and divide by 2 to come up with the next number in the sequence. And if it was an odd number, we're going to take the value, multiply it by 3, and add 1 to get the next value in the sequence. And then, so we have to use the correct formula in an incorrect case, or I should say, if we use a correct formula in an incorrect case, we can still get this point by computing the next value. And do we use the correct formula for the next value depending on whether it's even or odd? So those were really the only 3 points to part A in this particular solution. So let's work through, this is the canonical solution that's there. We get a value n, we set our count equal to 1. While n is greater than 1, if n is even, we divide by 2 to set the next value. If it's not even, in other words, it has to be odd, then we take the value, multiply by 3, and add 1 to set the next value. We increment our counter so we know what the length of our sequence is. And when we finally get to the point that n is greater than 1, or I'm sorry, n is no longer greater than 1, then we jump out of the loop and we return count. Okay, so let's compare the canonical solution to the 3-point rubric. So first point was, do we loop from a given starting value n until the sequence terminates using updated values for the current term? We do. We have a starting value n. We loop while n is greater than 1, and inside the loop, we're updating values for the current term, or we're updating values from the current term to make sure that we terminate at the correct point. Okay. Do we compute the next value? We do. In fact, in 2 different places, we compute the next value. And finally, do we use the correct formula for next value depending on even or odd? We do. If the value is even, then we divide by 2. If the value is odd, we multiply by 3 and add 1. Now, I know you're probably thinking, because there are times when this comes up at the actual reading, well, what about count? Part of this problem is we have to provide a count of the number of values in the sequence. That's kind of the point. We're supposed to find the length, and that's not part of the rubric. Well, in this case, my guess is what probably happened, or what would have happened if this had been at a reading, that concept or that skill, being able to count the occurrence of something, was probably already done or taken care of in another problem. In fact, if we go up and we look at the product review, I believe there was a point on that rubric that said we had to return the correct count of something. Okay, so because that skill was assessed in that point, and because we had to find other things, the 9 points were being distributed in this question differently, the decision was probably made because that skill was already being accounted for in a different question. We weren't going to assess the skill in this one. Okay, so that's the best reasoning I can come up with as to why count isn't dealt with in this rubric, is because it was already taken care of in another question. So okay, so again, just some little places where there might be some little potential errors. Okay, again, forgetting to declare and initialize local variables. We have a counter, we have to declare it as an int, and we have to start it at a starting value. So in this case, our count is automatically equal to 1. We have a value. Incorrect use or absence of the modulus operator. You know, the modulus we talked about tells us what the remainder of a division problem is. So if I want to know if a number is even or odd, by definition, an even number is a number that's divisible by 2. In other words, when I divide by 2, there is no remainder. The remainder equals, or I should say the remainder equals 0. Okay, so so we have to use modulus. We have to use modulus correctly, you know, dividing by 2 to determine the remainder, and then making sure that it equals 0 to determine whether a number is even or odd. Okay, whoops, going too far. Incorrect comparison to terminate the loop. In this particular problem, we're using n is greater than 1, but you know, I could picture students, if I was trying to picture the mistakes that students would make and kind of foresee some of the things that would pop up on this at a reading, I could see students saying n equal 1, or n is less than 1, or n is greater than 0, or I mean, I can see all kinds of ways that students could just be in a hurry, not really thinking, but just kind of maybe comparing to a past problem that they did in class and saying, well, these are really similar, so I'm going to do it the same way. I could see a lot of different things that could pop up that would be an incorrect comparison to make this loop stop. Okay, so again, just make sure you're being careful about loops. Why is my screen acting so weird? Okay, incorrectly updating the loop control variable. Incorrect update of loop control variable. So in this case, n is our loop control variable. I'm trying to figure out why I did one and not the other. I don't know. But I could foresee students like maybe using an incorrect formula, or if this were something where we were counting the number of times going through a loop and we were using an increment statement, I could see putting the increment statement in the wrong spot. So again, just make sure that we're updating our loop control variable in the correct place with the correct values. Missing return statement, we've already talked about that one. That would be another common one for this one, is forgetting to put the return at the bottom. And again, missing brackets. My students are rolling their eyes right now. Okay. And that brings us to the open-ended question for this one. And this one was a little longer, so it was hard to fit on the screen. So I kind of split it into 2 sections there. But again, I mean, like I said before, this was our attempt to come up with a question that was something similar to what the question was that was released on May 1st. Like
we
I
were
said,
also trying to combine part B and C. This was the way it was released in 2020, like this year, back before the world changed for everybody. It was a 3-parter, and so we tried to, you know, pull together. Part B was really small. There was not much meat on the bone in part B, and because part B, the whole purpose of part B was just a Boolean return to determine yes or no, is it long? And that was represented in that chart that you see in the background. And up there, by the way, Rob, if you'll move your mouse, see right behind example 2, that should be 8421. I hope that didn't throw anybody off. I doubt it did, but it should be right after example 2, open parentheses, that should be an 8. So,
okay.
Yeah. So,
Gotcha.
And then starting value of 8 is just, you know, whatever. So Oops. We do the best.
Yep.
So anywho, back to the story. We were trying to combine B and C, and since you had this table, part B's the entire purpose of the method for part B is long sequence, was to return true or false if the sequence was considered long. And so we gave you in the top paragraph in that background picture, a Hailstone sequence is considered long if its length is greater than its starting value. So if you look down at the table, like the 3rd item down is considered long because it has more in the sequence than the initial value of 3. So that was part B. Part C was to write a method called prop long, which stood for proportion of how many sequences in this batch are considered long. So the background table has this batch of 10 Hailstone sequences. So essentially you're looking at all 10 of those, like you can see the method call down below it. You've got this batch of sequences. How many of those 10, what proportion of them are long and what proportion are not long? So that was what we were looking for you to assess, is how would I write the proportion of long method so that it would give me back how many of a given batch are long or short. So just like last time, we followed the same kind of structure. The first thing has your little intro. Programmer wishes to complete the proportion of long method as described in the Hailstone class. And you did have to notice that the bottom of this question, the way that we gave it to you was exactly the way College Board released it. It gives you all three methods. We got some email from teachers like, how are we supposed to know what's in the is long method? And the is long method, like the signature of it was provided in the question, and actually this one was too. So some of y'all hopefully figured that out and saw that down on page 4, I guess, of the question, there actually was a method signature. So if you saw that, kudos to you, because there are all these little nuggets. I tell my class there's little puzzle pieces a lot of times with the free response. Okay, so write a description of how you would design the proportion of long method, prop long method. Assume that the methods Hailstone length and is long sequence work as specified. And you see what they return in the table. Length of sequence returns an int, long returns a Boolean, and then you wanted to give us a header and identify any existing methods that would be useful. Well, hopefully you would notice when you wrote or thought about designing it, do I need to use is long? Yeah, because I want to divide by the total, but my numerator needs to be how many of them were long. So my numerator is going to be if long, it equals true, and my denominator is going to be the whole batch. Let's see. What else? Describe any existing methods of the class. So again, hopefully you wrote 3 to 4 sentences explaining that. I don't think you have to write a whole essay. You know, kind of get out of the mode that you're writing for your English or history teacher. Write for technical writing. You're writing as a computer scientist to a computer scientist. So anything else there, Rob?
No, I don't think so. And I want to throw this on. I know there are some that are going to be disappointed that we didn't provide a rubric for these, but again, I mean,
We can't do that.
that would just be speculation at this point. Rubric, I wish I knew how the open-ended question was going to be scored on this one, but I don't know that
But we
anymore
don't
than
have
I
a
know.
rubric. We don't have a rubric for the other questions they'll see in
Yeah,
2020.
well,
I mean, I would
that's what I
say
was
that
going to say.
too.
I don't have any more insight or foresight on how this is going to be scored than I do the questions, the actual coding questions rubric.
That's right.
So unfortunately, we just don't have any back questions that we can pull samples of. Is the problem? I wish we
Yeah,
did.
don't let that stress you.
But
Just
yeah, don't
relax on this part. On the open-ended, my advice to my students is relax, pretend like you're discussing it with a partner in class, and tell your story of
Yeah,
your
absolutely,
thoughts as a
absolutely.
programmer.
Yep. And what I've told my students is just kind of use this as a checklist. Did you include a method header? Did you identify the existing methods? Did you describe? And if you do those things and you can kind of check those off the list, then the points will take care of themselves. Just make sure you're answering the question to the best of your ability, and that's the best you can do. All right. Anything else we need to say on that one?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So let's move on.
So this is information that we received from College Board. And by the way, there is a PDF document on the coronavirus update page with information about the open-ended questions. So students and teachers, you need to go there. Teachers can get this information also in the online teacher community, but it's also provided publicly on AP Central coronavirus updates. But the open-ended questions should be able to be answered sufficiently in 2 to 4 sentences, so a paragraph. The bullets are meant to guide your response. And then there's a second item here. This comes from the task verbs, and we've talked about these verbs a few different days on
Yeah,
here.
yeah, we've
What
talked about them quite a few.
identify means that you name something specific, like I need to create an array list, or I need to create a method to count, or a variable to count, or I need to, you know, make a new variable so that I can, I don't know, name something or whatever. And then describe would provide details, characteristics. And when they say visibility, they mean public, private, how is it accessed? So if you think of something there and you think, oh, it needs to be a public method or it needs to be a private item, note that in your response. So, and we've designed the ones for tomorrow to be different than the examples from yesterday. So, that should be helpful, I
Yeah,
hope.
there will be a couple different things tomorrow.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it'll be a different mock exam with 2 different types of open-ended questions, and we'll talk about them on
Yeah.
Thursday. So,
So College Board, did you have anything else with this
no,
one?
go
Okay, I
ahead.
didn't want to go on too quick.
No.
So College Board provided us with a page of some important links. So we'll give you a chance to make note of those, or if you're recording, if you're watching this with a recording, you can pause and jot some of these down. I mean, this is some information that you will most likely find helpful when you go out and look for it. The ones that I would specifically look at right now would be the AP demo. Make sure you are practicing like we've talked about. The required and recommended documents are in cb.org/AP exam day docs. There's the AP exam day checklist, which hopefully by now all of you have completely filled out and sitting by your computer ready to go since you received your confirmation hopefully yesterday, May 4th. But there are also some great videos out there to look at that kind of describe a walkthrough of the 2020 exams, and they describe the 5 things that you need to do before exam day and the exam rules video and all that good stuff. The one other link that was not on here that I wanted to make sure we added, because we meant to do this yesterday and then time got away from us, so I actually made a slide today so we wouldn't forget. The sample questions that were released by College Board have also been released to students. They were released in draft form to teachers in the online teacher community on May 1st. And then I believe yesterday was when they were released to students. And College Board asked that we make sure students are aware that these are there. So, so if you go to apcoronavirusupdates.collegeboard.org, look for the section for AP students and then click the link that says information for students. And then in there, I wanted to put all this because it's kind of a few clicks to get there. Inside the information for students, look for taking the exams and click the learn more link. And then the very top link that you'll find on that page, I mean, it's right there immediately at the top of the page, is online free response exams for each course. And then you'll want to scroll down under the math and computer science section and look for CSA, and it will give
I
you
have the document
tons of information.
open, so I'm going to share it real quick.
Yeah.
And show you the free response items that, one second, that are there. They're provided for you. You should be seeing a word screen. Is that right?
Yep, got it.
Okay, so I just went all the way down to whatever page number this is, page 3. If you remember, everybody, last week, Mr. Schultz and I went through the 2 problems in the course and exam description, gizmo and check digit. And so what College Board has released that Mr. Schultz just explained to you how to find is a document that part of which has examples or questions, open-ended questions, one for gizmo and one for check digit. So I have the gizmo one on my screen. I actually shaded it yellow just for your sake. It won't be yellow when you go get it from College Board. But this method says, write a method, get cheapest gizmo by maker, which will return the least expensive gizmo purchased by an individual from a given maker. Write the description of how you would change the gizmo and online purchaser classes to support this modification. So, and I know this may not be fresh on your mind, but part of what this question would cause you to have to look back and ponder is, do I have the things that I need to return the least expensive gizmo? Because in order to return that, I need to know how much a gizmo cost and be able to compare them to find the one that costs the least. So that's what you would have to look back at the class item information that's given, and then similar information here, give us a header, identify any variables, constructors, or methods. And again, you're not having to write code, you're just explaining the process that will be going through your mind, and then describe what you might do new or revised. And I hope you can kind of read the tea leaves of what I'm saying is, for this one, you don't have some of the things that you need. So you are going to have to think about what might need to be added. So that was the gizmo. So since we worked on this last week, this would be really good for y'all to do tonight. And when you write this response, try the AP demo and practice getting really quick at uploading your projects to the AP demo. When I met with my personal students this morning, I think only one of them had actually practiced the AP demo. So if you go to Hoover High School, you should be practicing that every day. And if you don't go to Hoover High School, you should be practicing AP demo every single day. Even if what you write on there is, Jill and Rob are driving me nuts and I'm ready for this to be over, put that in the AP demo and practice uploading a nice picture that says that.
That's ditto for the Bellbrook High School AP Computer Science A
Yes.
students. You know who you are.
Draw a
but
big old smiley face. I
that's
can't
ditto for
wait
everybody else.
to ace my AP exams, practice uploading that.
You
Okay,
should
so
all be doing that.
check digit is now on the screen. So this would be the open-ended example for check digit. And remember, check digit was that question where you were given a number and you're looking for, you multiply it by 7 times 6 times 5, and you get this other number out on the end. And, it was another interesting little number sequence. All this Fibonacci, Hailstone, check digit. I've got a lot of ideas for next year. So this says the programmer wants to modify check digit class to keep track of how many times a call is made with an incorrect check digit. Anytime the call is valid is made with the incorrect digit, account's going to be increased by 1. How would you write this method? So this is real similar to what you've done a lot of during the school year. And again, you can write your description of what you would change. Make sure that in your response you identify anything new that's needed, and you describe anything that could be revised, implemented, or changed. And you're just thinking out loud. You're kind of pseudocoding on paper. So hopefully that's helpful. So you can grab the screen back now.
Okay.
So y'all have got several options of what you can practice AP demo with. But only happy stuff. You could draw some picture for Cinco de Mayo.
Oh,
We're
there you go.
having Tacos Tuesday at my house tonight.
I think we are doing Taco Tuesday as well.
I know. I hope y'all are all doing Taco Tuesday wherever you are.
We have a local place that does amazing Mexican food that we're trying to support. It's called El Toro. So we're going to run up to El Toro tonight, maybe, and pick up some takeout. So
cool.
Yeah. So happy Cinco de Mayo, everybody.
That's right.
Thank you for watching.
5/5/2020. What a cool date today is.
I had to think about that for a second.
I know.
All right. Well, everybody have a great day.
Come back tomorrow. Be ready to mock.
Tomorrow.
Have your
we'll do
papers
another
ready.
mock exam.
That's right.
And don't forget to subscribe to the videos. Feel free if you're watching this. Feel free if you're watching this on the playlist. You can go back to the playlist, or you can select the next video, and we will see you soon.
We'll see you tomorrow.